The Academy's outer rim stretched into the void like a steel spine against the stars. Sector 9 was quiet. Too quiet for a place that usually hummed with drills, simulators, and the chatter of cadets. But tonight the corridor lay empty, lit only by the dim red glow of standby lights. No instructors, no patrols, just silence, and the faint buzz of air recyclers cycling through cold metal ducts. Lila Mason moved through the shadows, her boots barely making a sound on the grated floor. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her clearance only went as far as Sector 7, and even that was a recent upgrade after she'd scored top marks in tactical evasion. But something had pulled her deeper. Not orders. Not curiosity alone. It was more like a whisper in her bones, a pull she couldn't explain but couldn't ignore either. She adjusted the strap of her training pack, fingers brushing the edge of her sidearm. It wasn't loaded with live rounds, academy rules, but she kept it anyway. Habit. Instinct. Her great-grandmother had been a frontline officer during the last big push against the Krellian hive, back when humans still fought alone. Lila never met her, but the stories lived in her blood. Maybe that's why she felt things others didn't, why alarms sometimes went off in her head before they did on the walls. The corridor ahead narrowed, turning into a maintenance tunnel marked with faded glyphs, restricted zone, biohazard, authorized personnel only. None of those applied to her. But the door was slightly ajar, and from beyond it came a scent, sharp, clean, like frost and burning cedar. It shouldn't have been there. Nothing organic had been stored in Sector 9 for years. Not since the incident. Lila paused. Her pulse thudded in her throat. She could turn back. Log a report. Pretend she never saw the open door. But then she heard it. A soft click, like a claw tapping on metal. She stepped forward. The tunnel opened into a wide chamber, once used for drone calibration. Now it was empty except for a single pedestal in the center, glowing faintly blue. On it rested a data orb pulsing like a heartbeat. Lila had never seen one before, but she knew what it was. Elven tech. Forbidden. Lost. The kind of thing that got you court-martialed just for looking at it. She approached slowly. The air grew colder. Her breath fogged. And then, movement. 3 figures dropped from the ceiling like spiders, landing in perfect unison. They wore sleek black armor, segmented like insect carapace with no visible eyes, just smooth obsidian masks. Krellian scouts. Elite. Deadly. They weren't supposed to be inside human space, let alone inside the academy. Yet here they were, rifles raised, barrels humming to life. Layla froze. Her training screamed at her to drop, roll, return fire, but there was nowhere to go. The walls were too close, the exit too far. And they weren't aiming to wound. They were aiming to erase. The lead scout tilted its head. A voice crackled from its mask, distorted and guttural. Cadet Lila Mason, Bloodline Mason 7, you are designated termination priority Alpha. Her stomach dropped. They knew her name. Her lineage. That wasn't possible. That data was sealed behind 7 layers of encryption, known only to High Command and the archivists of the old fleet. Before she could speak, the first shot fired. Plasma seared past her ear, melting a chunk of wall behind her. Heat blistered her skin. She stumbled back, hands up, heart hammering. The second shot hit the floor at her feet, sending sparks flying. The third, she braced for impact, but it never came. A wind roared through the chamber, sudden and violent, as if the vacuum of space had rushed in. The lights flickered, then died, replaced by a pale silver glow that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The Krellian spun, rifles tracking upward. From the ceiling, a figure dropped. She landed without sound, bare feet meeting metal as if the surface were water. Tall and slender, she moved like smoke-given form. Her skin held a faint luminescence like moonlight on snow. Long silver-white hair floated around her shoulders, untouched by gravity. Her eyes, deep, ancient, burning with quiet fury, locked onto the scouts. She wore no armor, no weapon, just a simple tunic woven with threads that shimmered like starlight. Yet the Krellians recoiled as if struck. "You do not touch her," the woman said. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of glaciers and thunder. The lead scout fired. The plasma bolt stopped midair, inches from the woman's chest, then shattered into harmless sparks. She didn't flinch. She simply raised one hand, palm open. The air cracked. The 3 Krellians froze, not in fear, in place. as if time itself had gripped them. Their armor began to glow red, then white, then crumble into ash that drifted to the floor like black snow. Within seconds they were gone. No screams. No explosions. Just silence and the soft hiss of cooling metal. The woman turned. Lila stood trembling, wide-eyed, still pressed against the wall. She wanted to run, to shout, to ask who this was, what just happened, but her voice wouldn't come. The woman walked toward her unhurried. She knelt, placing a cool hand on Lila's forehead. A wave of calm washed over her, dulling the panic, slowing her breath. Lila's knees gave out and she sank to the floor, unconscious before she hit the ground. When she awoke moments later, though it felt like hours, the chamber was empty, except for the woman and the data orb, now dark. The woman stood over her holding Lila's gear. Helmet, sidearm, comms unit, even her academy badge, all intact. All clean, as if the fight had never happened. Lila tried to speak, but her throat was dry. The woman helped her sit up, then placed the gear gently in her lap. They targeted you because you carry the echo, the woman said. The same echo that burned their queens a century ago. Lila blinked. Who are you, Sylvain? The woman replied. Last of the Skyward Keepers. And your great-grandmother's oath sister. Lila's breath caught. Captain Elise Mason had spoken of an elf in her journals. Brief coded entries about a warrior who rode dragons and sang stars into alignment. The command had dismissed it as wartime delirium, but Lila had always believed. Sylvain looked toward the tunnel entrance. They will send more. The hive knows you've awakened. Awakened what? Lila whispered. Your blood remembers, Sylvain said, and blood is the only language the hive fears. She stood, offering a hand. Lila took it, surprised by how strong the elf's grip was, gentle but unbreakable. Outside, the academy alarms finally blared. Red lights spinning wildly. Distant shouts echoed down the halls. We have 23 seconds before the lockdown seals this sector, Sylvain said. Come. Lila hesitated, only a heartbeat. Then she stood, clutching her gear, and followed the elf into the dark. Behind them, the chamber collapsed in on itself, walls folding like paper, erasing all trace of what had happened. By the time security teams arrived, Sector 9 was empty. No bodies, no plasma burns, no sign of intrusion, only a single cadet's boot print on the floor, and the faint scent of pine and ozone lingering in the air. Back in the infirmary, Lila would be listed as found unconscious during routine patrol. Minor concussion, no memory of incident. Her file would be updated, her clearance quietly revoked. But none of that mattered now, because 23 seconds after the ambush began, she had emerged, unshaken, alive, and holding her gear, and in her pocket, hidden beneath the lining of her uniform, the data orb pulsed once softly like a second heartbeat. Quen 3 Max 1131. Lila woke to a sound she could not place, a low, rhythmic rumble, like distant thunder wrapped in velvet. Her head throbbed, but the pain was dull now, muffled by something warm and steady in her chest. She blinked against the sterile white light of the academy infirmary. Clean sheets, soft pillows, the hum of medical drones hovering near the ceiling. Everything looked normal, too normal. Then she saw it. Curled beside her bed, resting its chin on its front paws, was a creature no bigger than a large dog, but nothing like any animal she had ever seen. Its body was covered in smooth obsidian scales that shimmered faintly under the lights. Two wings folded neatly against its sides looked strong enough to carry it through storms. Its eyes, half-lidded and glowing like banked coals, watched her with calm intelligence. Not fear, not hunger. Something closer to recognition. It made that rumbling sound again, softer this time, and nudged a sealed ration bar toward her hand with its snout. The wrapper was torn at one corner as if opened by teeth, but the contents were untouched. A gift. Lila reached out slowly. The creature didn't flinch. Its scales were warm to the touch, humming faintly like a live wire wrapped in silk. She picked up the ration bar, her fingers trembling. Who are you? She whispered. Before the creature could respond, though she wasn't sure it could, the door slid open with a quiet hiss. Sylvain entered. She wore the same simple tunic as before, but now it was dusted with ash and something darker. Dried residue that might have been blood. Her silver hair was tied back loosely, and her eyes held the same ancient calm, though now there was a flicker of something else. Concern, maybe even urgency. His name is Emberclaw, Sylvain said, her voice low but clear. He chose you, Lila sat up, wincing slightly. Chose me for what? Sylvain didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the bedside and placed a small flat data chip on the table. It pulsed once with a soft blue light. Your superiors believe you were caught in a training malfunction. They think you blacked out from a faulty sim rig. They're wrong, Lila swallowed. I remember the Krellians. I remember you. Good, Sylvain said. Then you'll understand this. She tapped the chip. The hive didn't attack you by accident. They targeted you because your DNA matches a resonance signature, one that hasn't been active in over 90 years. Lila's breath caught. My great-grandmother, Sylvain nodded. Captain Elise Mason was the last human to stand beside an elf in open battle. She carried a genetic marker, silent in most but loud in her line. It disrupts the hive's neural field, makes their weapons misfire. Their scouts go blind. Their queens scream in their thrones. Lila stared at her hands. They looked ordinary. Calloused from drills, scarred from climbs, but human. Just human. How is that even possible? Because your blood remembers, Sylvain said simply. And the hive never forgets a threat. Emberclaw let out a soft chuff and climbed onto the bed, curling against Lila's side like a cat seeking warmth. His heat seeped through the thin infirmary blanket. Grounding her, she reached down and scratched behind one of his horns. He leaned into it, eyes closing in contentment. Why are you telling me this now? Lila asked. Why not just let them think it was a glitch because the hive knows you're awake? Sylvain said. They'll come again. And next time they won't send scouts. They'll send a reaper swarm. Or worse, a mind-taker. Lila went still. Mind-takers were the stuff of nightmares. Krellian bioengineered horrors that could peel memories from a brain like fruit from a rind. Survivors were left hollow, babbling shells. You're not safe here, Sylvain continued. Not in the academy. Not on this station. Not anywhere the hive can reach. Then where am I safe? Sylvain met her gaze. With me. Outside, the corridor remained quiet. Too quiet, no nurses, no orderlies. Even the usual hum of the station seemed muted, as if the entire facility was holding its breath. They've locked down this wing, Sylvain said as if reading Lila's thoughts. Not to protect you. To contain you. Command received an alert from the hive's comms burst. They think you've been compromised. Lila's stomach twisted. They think I'm a spy. They think you're a vector, Sylvain corrected. A carrier of something they don't understand. And humans fear what they can't control. Emberclaw growled softly, a warning rumbled deep in his chest. His eyes flicked toward the door. Sylvain moved instantly. She pressed a hand to the wall beside the bed and the metal groaned softly, warping inward to reveal a hidden panel. Part of the old maintenance network, long abandoned. We go now. Lila didn't hesitate. She swung her legs off the bed, still weak but determined. She grabbed her gear from the foot of the bed, helmet, sidearm, boots, and dressed quickly. Her uniform was wrinkled, her boots scuffed, but she felt more herself than she had in weeks. Sylvain handed her the data chip. Keep this close. It holds the last transmission from your great-grandmother. Encrypted. Only your biometrics can unlock it. Lila tucked it into her inner pocket, next to the orb from Sector 9, which still pulsed faintly against her ribs. They slipped into the maintenance shaft just as heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Voices followed, sharp, urgent. Scan the room. Full neural sweep. If she's awake, she's already compromised. The panel sealed behind them with a soft click. Darkness swallowed them, broken only by Emberclaw's glowing eyes lighting the path ahead. They moved through narrow tunnels, climbing ladders, ducking under pipes that hissed with steam. Sylvain moved like she'd done this 1,000 times. Her bare feet silent on the metal grates. Emberclaw stayed close to Lila, his tail brushing her leg like a tether. After 20 minutes, they reached a service airlock on the station's underbelly. Sylvain input a code into the panel, how she knew it. Lila didn't ask, and the outer door slid open to reveal a waiting shuttle. Small, sleek, unmarked. Its hull was matte black, absorbing the starlight. Where are we going? Lila asked as she climbed in. To the only place the hive won't follow, Sylvain said, powering up the engines. The vault beneath the moon. Emberclaw leapt into the co-pilot seat and curled up, wings tucking around himself like a cloak. Lila strapped in, heart racing not from fear but from something deeper. Purpose. As the shuttle detached from the station and shot into the void, Lila looked back at the academy, shrinking against the stars. It had been her home for 2 years. Her dream. Now it felt like a cage she'd never noticed. What happens when we get to the vault, she asked. Sylvain's hands moved over the controls with quiet precision. You'll see what your great-grandmother saw. You'll learn why the elves vanished, and you'll decide if you're ready to finish what she started. Lila touched the data chip through her uniform. And if I'm not, Sylvain glanced at her, eyes glowing faintly in the dim cockpit light. Then the hive wins, and humanity falls alone as it always feared it would. The shuttle banked hard, angling toward Titan's icy horizon. Ahead, the stars burned cold and bright. Behind them, the Academy vanished into the dark. Emberclaw let out a soft purr, pressing his warm body against Lila's leg. She wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time, she didn't feel like just a cadet. She felt like an heir. The shuttle cut through the rings of Saturn like a blade through smoke, its hull humming with suppressed energy. Below, Titan's surface stretched in frozen silence. Endless plains of ice, methane lakes black as oil, and jagged ridges that clawed at the sky. Lila pressed her face to the viewport, breath fogging the glass. She had studied this moon in Academy briefings, but nothing prepared her for its stillness. It felt less like a world and more like a tomb. Sylvain guided the ship with quiet focus, her fingers dancing over the controls without ever looking down. Emberclaw lay coiled in the rear seat, eyes half closed but ears twitching at every shift in the engine's tone. He hadn't made a sound since they left the station, as if he understood the weight of what lay ahead. We're not landing on the surface, Sylvain said suddenly, her voice low. The vault is beneath it, Lila turned. How far down? 3 kilometers. Carved into the bedrock during the First War. Humans built it. Elves sealed it. Why would humans build something elves had to seal? Sylvain's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes dimmed, because they were afraid of what they'd created. The shuttle descended into a narrow canyon, its walls sheer and glassy from ancient plasma strikes. At the canyon's heart, a flat disk of black metal lay embedded in the ice. No markings, no doors, just smooth, seamless alloy. To anyone else, it would look like wreckage. To Sylvain, it was a keyhole. She activated a sequence on the console. The disk responded instantly, glowing with faint blue lines that spread outward like veins. With a deep groan, the ground split open, revealing a spiraling ramp that led down into darkness. The shuttle sank slowly, lights cutting through the gloom. The air grew colder, thicker, charged with something that made Lila's skin prickle. Emberclaw lifted his head, nostrils flaring. They reached the bottom after 10 minutes. The ramp sealed above them, plunging them into total blackness, until Sylvain touched a panel on the wall. Soft white light bloomed from crystals embedded in the ceiling, revealing a vast chamber lined with towering pillars. Each one pulsed with a slow, rhythmic glow like sleeping hearts. This was Vault Omega. Lila stepped out of the shuttle, boots clicking on the polished floor. The air smelled of ozone and old stone. Ahead, a wide archway led deeper into the complex. Above it, carved in both human and elven script, were words she somehow understood without reading them. Here sleeps the truth that burned the sky. This is where they kept the records, Sylvain said, walking beside her. Not just data, memories, emotions, echoes of battles fought and lost. Emberclaw padded ahead, tail low, ears forward. He stopped at the center of the chamber, where a pedestal rose from the floor. On it rested a single crystal, cracked but still glowing faintly. Sylvain placed a hand on Lila's shoulder. Your great-grandmother stood here. She was the last human to activate the core. What core? Sylvain didn't answer. Instead, she guided Lila to the pedestal. Place your hand on the crystal. Lila hesitated. What happens if I do? You'll see what she saw. You'll feel what she felt. And if your blood is true, the vault will wake. Lila looked at her palm. It trembled slightly. She thought of Captain Elise Mason, brave, fierce, alone. She thought of the Krellians in Sector 9, how they knew her name before she even spoke it. She thought of Emberclaw choosing her, of Sylvain risking everything to save her. She wasn't just Lila Mason, cadet. She was Lila Mason, heir to a war no one remembered. She placed her hand on the crystal. The moment her skin touched it, the chamber exploded with light. Holograms burst from the floor, ghosts of the past made real. Lila saw human soldiers in battered armor standing shoulder to shoulder, with elves whose eyes burned with starlight. She saw dragons, massive, radiant creatures soaring through asteroid fields, breathing fire that turned enemy ships to vapor. She saw her great-grandmother, younger than she'd imagined, standing on the bridge of a warship, giving orders as the sky burned around her. And then she saw the betrayal. Not by the Hive, by humans. High Command, fearing the power of the elf-human bond, had ordered the severing of all ties. They shut down joint operations, recalled all human forces, left the elves to face the Hive alone. The elves, bound by oath and honor, refused to abandon their human allies. So the humans sealed them away, here in Vault Omega, not as prisoners but as relics, a weapon too dangerous to use. The Hive, sensing the rift, struck hard. Without elven magic to disrupt their neural field, human fleets crumbled. Entire colonies fell in days. The war didn't end. It just went quiet until now. Lila gasped, pulling her hand back. Tears streamed down her face, though she didn't remember crying. "They left you," she whispered. Sylvain nodded, her voice thick. "We waited, we hoped. But hope is a fragile thing in the dark." Emberclaw nudged Lila's hand, his warmth a comfort against the cold truth. "Why show me this?" Lila asked. "Because the Hive didn't just imprison us," Sylvain said. "They found a way to harvest our magic. They built machines that drain elven essence from those still in stasis. They use it to power their war engines, to control their fleets, to silence human resistance." Lila's blood ran cold. "How many are still alive? Hundreds? Maybe thousands. Scattered across hidden vaults. But they're fading. Every day the Hive takes more." Lila looked at the cracked crystal. "Can we stop it?" Sylvain met her gaze. "Only if the bloodline is strong enough. Only if you can awaken the Skyfire node. The heart of this vault. A relic older than both our peoples. It responds to the echo in your DNA. If you activate it, it will send a pulse across the system. One that disrupts the Hive's control field and awakens every imprisoned elf." Lila swallowed. "And if I fail, then the Hive will know you're here. And they'll send everything they have." As if on cue, Emberclaw let out a sharp growl. His head snapped toward the entrance. The crystals in the ceiling flickered. Sensors blared, a soft, rising tone that echoed through the chamber. Sylvain's eyes narrowed. "They found us." Lila's heart pounded. "How your activation triggered a beacon. The Hive monitors all elven energy signatures. They've been waiting for someone to wake the vault." She grabbed Lila's arm. "We don't have time. You must choose now." Lila looked at the pedestal, at the holograms still flickering around her, at the faces of soldiers who had fought and died for a bond humans had thrown away. She thought of her great-grandmother, standing alone on that bridge, knowing she'd been abandoned but fighting anyway. She wasn't alone, not anymore. "Show me the node," she said. Sylvain led her through a hidden passage behind the pedestal. The tunnel sloped downward, walls lined with more glowing crystals. At the end stood a circular platform, suspended over a bottomless shaft. In its center floated a sphere of pure light, shifting, breathing, alive. "The Skyfire node. Place both hands on the rim," Sylvain instructed. "Don't fight the current. Let it flow through you." Lila stepped onto the platform. The air crackled. Emberclaw stayed at the edge, watching, ready. She placed her hands on the rim. Energy surged through her. Not pain, but power. Images flooded her mind. Stars being born, dragons singing in harmony, elves weaving light into shields, humans charging into battle with fire in their eyes. She felt the echo in her blood roar to life, answering the node's call. The sphere brightened. Outside, alarms wailed. The ground shook. Heavy impacts echoed from above, dropships. Plasma fire. "Hurry," Sylvain urged. Lila closed her eyes and pushed. The node erupted. A wave of golden light shot upward, tearing through the vault, through Titan's crust, into the sky. It spread across the system like a ripple in a pond. Silent but unstoppable. Somewhere deep in Krellian space, a stasis pod cracked open, then another, and another. Back in the chamber, Lila collapsed to her knees, gasping. The node dimmed but didn't go out. It had done its work. Sylvain helped her up. "It's begun." Emberclaw let out a triumphant roar, wings flaring wide. Above them, the ceiling shattered as a Krellian dreadnought broke through the ice, its underbelly bristling with weapons. Searchlights swept the canyon. Sylvain's eyes gleamed with something Lila had never seen before. Hope. "Time to go?" she said. Lila nodded, climbing onto Emberclaw's back as the dragon grew larger, his scales hardening, his eyes blazing with ancient fire. The war wasn't over. It was just waking up. The vault shook as the Krellian dreadnought tore through Titan's ice crust, its massive hull blotting out the stars. Plasma turrets swiveled, locking onto the shattered entrance below. Inside the chamber, Emberclaw stood tall, his body expanding with every breath, scales hardening into armor, wings stretching wide enough to shield Lila and Sylvain from falling debris. Lila clung to his spine, heart pounding but mind clear. The Skyfire pulse had worked. She could feel it in her bones like a song echoing across the void. Somewhere out there, elves were waking, but here now, they were still alone. Sylvain leapt onto Emberclaw's back behind her, one hand gripping the dragon's ridge, the other drawing a blade from her belt. It wasn't metal. It was solidified light, humming with a sound like wind through ancient trees. "Hold on," she said. Emberclaw launched upward with a roar that shook the canyon walls. They burst into the open just as the first plasma barrage hit. Fire seared the ice where they'd stood seconds before, melting craters into the frozen ground. Emberclaw banked hard, dodging a second volley, his movements impossibly fast for something so large. Lila's stomach dropped as they spiraled into the sky, the dreadnought looming above like a black god. "They're scanning for the node signature," Sylvain shouted over the wind. "They know you activated it." Lila tightened her grip. "What do? We give them something else to fear." Sylvain raised her blade. Emberclaw responded instantly, diving toward the dreadnought's underbelly. Lila unholstered her sidearm, not the Academy's training model, but the real one Sylvain had returned to her, loaded with live rounds keyed to her biometrics. She didn't know how it worked, only that it felt right in her hand. As they neared the ship, panels along its hull slid open, releasing a swarm of hunter drones, small, fast, and lethal. They zipped toward them like angry hornets, weapons charging. Emberclaw opened his jaws. A torrent of white-hot plasma erupted from his throat, engulfing the drones in a single blast. They vaporized mid-air, leaving only shimmering ash. The dragon didn't slow. He slammed into the dreadnought's hull, claws tearing through reinforced plating like paper. Lila fired. Her shots didn't explode on impact. Instead, they pulsed with a soft blue light spreading across the ship's surface like cracks in glass. Wherever the round struck, the hive's systems flickered and died. Lights went dark. Turrets froze. Even the ship's gravity field stuttered. "Your blood disrupts their field," Sylvain said, awe in her voice. "You're not just fighting them. You're unraveling them." Lila fired again, aiming for the command spire jutting from the ship's rear, the nerve center of the entire fleet. Each shot resonated with the echo in her DNA, sending waves of interference through the hive's network. Across the system, reports would be flooding in, ships going dark, scouts collapsing, queens screaming in their thrones. But the dreadnought wasn't done. Its main cannon charged, a massive barrel glowing red with stored energy. It wasn't aimed at Emberclaw. It was aimed at Titan's surface at the vault below. They wanted to bury the truth forever. "They're going to destroy the vault," Lila yelled. "Then we stop the cannon," Sylvain replied. Emberclaw roared and surged forward, wings folding tight as he shot like a bullet toward the spire. Lila braced herself, lining up her shot. The cannon's core was exposed, a pulsing orb of crimson energy. One clean hit could overload it. She fired. The round struck true. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the orb flared violently, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. Alarms blared from the ship. The cannon destabilized, energy surging backward into the dreadnought's systems. "Hold on," Sylvain warned. The explosion tore through the ship from within. Fire bloomed outward, consuming decks, melting bulkheads, silencing the hive's song. The dreadnought listed sideways, breaking apart in the thin atmosphere. Emberclaw pulled up just in time, riding the shockwave like a surfer on a tidal wave. Debris rained down around them, burning as it fell. Below, the vault remained intact. Lila gasped for air, smoke stinging her eyes. "Did we do it?" Sylvain looked at the burning wreck, then at the stars beyond. "We did more than destroy a ship. We sent a message." As if in answer, a new light appeared on the horizon, not from a weapon, but from space itself. A dozen points of silver fire, streaking toward Titan, then more. Dozens, hundreds, elven ships. Sleek, organic vessels shaped like crescent moons, their hulls shimmering with living crystal. They emerged from warp not with violence but with grace, forming a protective ring around the moon. From their decks, figures stood, tall, luminous, eyes burning with long-suppressed fury. the first of the awakened. One ship broke formation, gliding down to hover beside Emberclaw. Its ramp lowered, revealing an elf with scars across his face and a staff of woven starlight. He bowed deeply to Sylvain. "Keeper Sylvain," he said, voice rough with disuse. The stasis broke. The hive reels. "We are free," Sylvain nodded. "Thanks to her." All eyes turned to Lila. The elf studied her, then knelt mid-air, one hand over his heart. "Blood of Elise Mason, you have returned the sky to us." Lila didn't know what to say. She just nodded, throat tight. Sylvain placed a hand on her shoulder. "This is only the beginning. The hive will retaliate. They'll send their queens, their reapers, their mind takers. They'll burn worlds to stop you." Lila looked at her sidearm, then at the fleet forming around them, at Emberclaw still glowing with battle heat, at Sylvain who had waited a century for this moment. "Then let them come," she said. The elven ships rose as one, forming a wedge with Emberclaw at its tip. Lila sat straighter, scanning the stars. Somewhere out there, human fleets still fought, unaware that their oldest allies had returned, unaware that the tide had turned. Sylvain activated a comm link. "All ships, this is Keeper Sylvain. Relay this message to every human outpost, every hidden colony, every academy cadet still training in the dark." She paused, then spoke the words that would reignite a war and a hope. "Tell them the Mason line stands again. Tell them the dragons fly. And tell them, we are coming home." Emberclaw let out a final, echoing roar, and the fleet surged forward, not in retreat, but in advance, toward the edge of known space, toward the heart of the hive, toward the future they would carve together. Human and elf, fire and starlight, blood and oath, and Lila Mason, once just a cadet, now rode at the front of it all, unshaken, awake, and ready. 3 weeks had passed since the Skyfire pulse tore through the system. In that time, the stars had changed. No longer silent, no longer divided. Human fleets, once scattered and defensive, now moved with purpose. Elven warships, sleek, glowing. Vessels shaped like falling leaves, sailed beside them, their hulls humming with ancient power. And at the center of it all flew the Ember's Vow, a hybrid craft forged from human steel and elven crystal, its bridge commanded by a cadet who had never finished her final exam. Lila Mason stood at the forward viewport, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the void ahead. She wore a uniform unlike any in the academy, dark gray with silver thread woven into the seams, a dragon sigil stitched over her heart. Her sidearm rested at her hip, its biometric lock warm against her skin. Behind her, the bridge buzzed with quiet activity. Human officers and elven navigators worked side by side, voices low, movements precise. Trust had not come easily, but it had come. Sylvain stood to her left, silent as always, one hand resting on the console. Her silver hair caught the soft light of the star charts, and her eyes held the calm of someone who had waited a lifetime for this moment. Emberclaw lay coiled around the command chair, wings draped like a cloak, eyes half closed but alert. He rarely left Lila's side now. Not out of duty, but choice. A junior officer approached, her uniform crisp, her voice steady despite the weight of what she carried. "Ma'am, long-range sensors confirm the dreadnought Blackmaw is holding position at the edge of the Orion Veil. The Hive Queen is aboard." Lila didn't turn. Any movement, none, but they're broadcasting on all channels, repeating the same message. Sylvain's fingers twitched. "They want you to hear it." Lila nodded. "Play it." The bridge speakers crackled to life. A voice emerged, not mechanical, not distorted, but smooth, cold, and deeply intelligent. It slithered through the air like smoke. "You think one human girl and her pet can undo centuries of conquest. You think blood and memory can break what we have built. Come then, bring your dragons, bring your ghosts. We will unmake you as we unmade your ancestors." The message ended. Silence returned, heavier than before. Lila exhaled slowly. Then she turned to the officer. "Relay this to all ships. Full fleet formation Delta. Prepare for final approach." The officer saluted and hurried off. Sylvain watched Lila. "You're not afraid." "I am," Lila admitted. "But fear doesn't stop me anymore. It just tells me what matters." Emberclaw lifted his head and let out a low, rumbling purr. It wasn't comfort. It was agreement. The Ember's vow moved forward, flanked by hundreds of ships, human destroyers with reinforced hulls, elven skiffs that bent light around them, even a few reactivated Academy training vessels, now armed and crewed by cadets who refused to wait on the sidelines. They were not an army. They were a promise. As they neared the Orion Veil, a swirling nebula of dust and ion storms, the Black Maw came into view. It was monstrous, a kilometer-long spine of black chitin and pulsing veins, bristling with weapons that fed on stolen elven magic. At its heart glowed a massive core, the Hive Queen's throne where thousands of captured elves were still imprisoned, their essence siphoned to power the ship. Sylvain placed a hand on Lila's arm. That core is tied to every stasis vault. If we destroy it, all the others will collapse. The elves will be free or lost forever. Lila understood. This wasn't just a battle. It was a gamble with every life still trapped in the dark. Then we don't destroy it, she said. We reclaim it. She turned to the comms officer. Patch me through to every ship, human and elf. A moment later, her voice rang across the fleet. This is Cadet Lila Mason of the Mason Line. My great-grandmother fought beside your ancestors. She was abandoned, but she never stopped believing in this alliance. Today we finish what she started, not with fire alone, but with truth. She tapped her chest. My blood carries the echo, and I'm going to use it to sever the Hive's hold. When I do, the core will be vulnerable. For exactly 23 seconds, the same time it took Sylvain to save me in Sector 9, the Hive's control field will drop. That's your window. She looked at Sylvain. You'll lead the strike team inside. Free the elves. Sylvain nodded. And you? I'll be the key. Emberclaw rose, scales shimmering with energy. He knew what was coming. Lila climbed onto his back. The dragon leapt from the bridge through an open launch bay, wings snapping wide as they plunged into the void. Behind them, the fleet held position, weapons charged, heart steady. The Black Maw opened fire. Plasma bolts the size of buildings streaked toward them. Emberclaw twisted through the storm, faster than thought, his body shielded by a barrier of elven light woven by Sylvain from afar. Lila held tight, her sidearm drawn, her focus absolute. They reached the core. It pulsed like a diseased heart, veins of stolen magic throbbing across its surface. Lila raised her weapon and fired. The first shot struck true. The core shuddered. The second cracked its shell. The third, she poured everything into it, her blood, her will, her lineage. The echo surged. A golden wave erupted from the core, washing over the Black Maw, over the fleet, over the entire nebula. The Hive's song faltered, then stopped. 23 seconds. Sylvain and a team of elven warriors teleported inside, blades flashing, freeing stasis pods one by one. Elves tumbled out, weak but alive, their eyes clearing as the Hive's grip released. On the bridge of the Black Maw, the Queen screamed, a sound that shattered glass and bent metal, but no one came to her aid. Her drones collapsed, her weapons died. Her empire unraveled in less than half a minute. Lila watched from Emberclaw's back as the core dimmed, then brightened with a new light. Pure, clean, elven. The Hive was broken. Not by a weapon, not by numbers, but by a cadet who remembered. The fleet surged forward, not to destroy, but to secure. Human medics boarded the dreadnought to tend to freed prisoners. Elven singers began the ritual of cleansing, purging the ship of Hive corruption, and at the center of it all, Lila landed Emberclaw on the Black Maw's bridge, stepping onto the cracked floor where the Queen once ruled. The throne was empty. Only ash remained. Sylvain appeared beside her, breathless but smiling. It's done. Lila looked out through the shattered viewport at the fleet, human and elf side by side, lights mingling like stars reborn. No, she said softly. It's just beginning. Weeks later, the alliance was formalized. New academies opened, teaching both human tactics and elven resonance. Emberclaw became a symbol, his image painted on ship hulls, his roar used as a battle cry. And Lila Mason, though offered command of an entire fleet, chose instead to lead from the front, always with Sylvain at her side and a dragon at her back. They were no longer separate species fighting separate wars. They were one, and the stars, for the first time in a century, burned not with fear, but with hope.